Oh my god, you have to help me. I've been stuck inside the Nintendo Switch's music library for weeks now. It's just so quiet in here, I think I'm going insane. They also said that if you stay in here for long enough, you get something called the hunting game cough. What is that even? I need to get out of here! Following the release of the Nintendo Switch back in 2017, I was extremely excited to get my hands on the console. Sure, the Wii U had a lot of good things going for it, but it also had quite a few bad things.
My time's dropping fast, people.
And I, like many others, was ready for the next big home console from Nintendo. Tons of amazing new games were coming, the new hybrid design was really interesting, all things were pointing to a great console generation here. All things except one. I can't hear! The year is 2008. The Nintendo DS is more popular than ever. Everyone had one and everyone was talking about them. And if you didn't have one, what the hell were you doing with your life? Jeez, why does everyone have one of those things? They should be out enjoying real life instead of playing all those games. It's such a waste of time. Waste of time? You come back to me when you get to pet a dog. Can't do that with your real life, can you? Nintendo knew they had struck gold with the DS, and it was inevitable that a successor would be releasing at some point. It was only a matter of time. Of course, since 2006, we already had the DS Lite, a sleeker, more lightweight, and overall more modern-looking version of the original brick-like DS. But the looks really were the only thing that changed about the console. No new features were added to the Lite variant, and customers had to wait over 2 years to see what was next for the Nintendo DS. Eventually, though, we got to feast our eyes on the DSi, and this console is where I want to begin today. The Nintendo DSi was the first Nintendo console to have original music tracks play throughout the entire system interface. Wait a minute. Damn it, thought it was a leap year. Before the DSi, we obviously had the Wii, which contained some iconic songs of gaming history, and honestly in pop culture history in general. Most recognizable was the Mii Channel theme, followed by the Wii Shop channel, but the list goes on for a while. The main focus with music in the Wii system interface was with the channels themselves, with each one having its own original theme when clicked on from the home screen. All of the default channels that were automatically on the system also had multiple original songs to enjoy when the channels were actually opened. Obviously, none of this music was necessary to have. You were either simply checking the news or the weather or scribbling all over a random picture. You know, who the hell was checking the weather on their Wii? Alright, let's see what Mother Nature's got for us today. Oh god. Oh f***. Circling back to the DSi, it too continued the trend of system music very similarly to the Wii, with music for the home menu, eShop, and multiple tracks for apps like the camera and sound. While not nearly as recognizable as the Wii, if you ever had a DSi, you're going to remember these songs and sounds. They gave the system its own personality, and I think that was something really special that other consoles weren't doing. Instead of only remembering a console fondly because of the games you played on it, you can also remember it for the immense charm of the interface alone. Sure, this can still happen without music, but with how much of a nostalgia trigger music has the ability to be, this definitely helps immensely in leaving a lasting impression. If we fast forward 3 more years, we can see the 3DS taking this concept and absolutely running with it, having custom tracks for things as minuscule as your friends list, activity log, and even the device's initial setup and configuration. Heck, for the system settings alone, there are technically 8 different songs you can hear in specific areas of the application. In the eShop, there were 6.
The coolest thing that I think the 3DS did with music though involved the system transfer function within the settings. This allowed you to transfer all the data from one 3DS to another wirelessly. There are two separate music tracks on the screen, one for sending data and one for receiving it, so obviously both tracks would be playing simultaneously during the transfer process. But get this, the send and receive tracks literally complement each other musically between the two 3DS systems during this process. There was absolutely no reason there needed to be music during this in the first place, let alone a cross-system duet, but they did it, and even though not many people will notice these subtle Easter eggs and the presence of so many different tracks in general, they still did it. Myself and many others are very, very appreciative of that. But it wasn't just the music on the 3DS that gave it personality. 3 years after the console launched, a system update was pushed out that added the Theme Shop, a brand new way to give the system your own personal flair. Themes would modify the aesthetic appearance of your home screen, replacing the generic look with various video game scenes, characters, or other designs, as well as some even using custom sound effects and music. 5 themes were automatically installed on the system initially, and the user could purchase more from the Theme Shop for a small fee if they wanted to. Did I mention the Theme Shop also has its own music track? Oh, and the shop itself wasn't small either. There were hundreds of themes to choose from, spanning tons of different games and aesthetics.
What are you doing?
Nothing!
The Wii U had a similar story compared to the 3DS when it came to the music within the system interface, with multiple variations of songs depending on what you were doing on the console. Something notable about this console though was the fact that the eShop had 12 different music track variants, 2 of which were only available during Christmas of 2013 and 2015 respectively. Additionally, the same concept of music complementing each other across devices was used again here on a much larger scale between the gamepad and the TV. In many places, such as the Mii Maker, a different track would play from both the TV and the gamepad, creating, for one, a pseudo surround sound system and also the same effect I mentioned between the two 3DS systems during a system transfer. Like I said earlier, none of this music was necessary for any of these systems to serve their purpose as a game console, but having all these unique and charming tracks to hear every time we used them definitely made the experience just that much better. However, the music wasn't the only thing that gave these systems personality. The way I feel when using a Nintendo system from this era, specifically between the Wii and the Wii U, is a feeling that isn't really matched by any other console. The obvious amount of love, character, and attention to detail that went into creating these systems truly helped them to feel alive, like it was more than just a game console menu. I love the little things like the sound effects that played when pressing buttons on the menu, or the jingles that would play when you hovered over a channel on the home menu, or when you start up your Wii U and all the Miis run onto the TV screen. All of these tiny quirks and unnecessary additions were what made these consoles so memorable, and a certain newer console fails to check most of these boxes. My favorite part of these interfaces by far though are the multitude of tiny characters that are there to help you around the menus. Take the internet settings on the 3DS for example. There's a tiny robot thing that pops up from the bottom of the screen every time you enter this area of the settings, and I should also mention that the music changes here too. The robot is there to help you through setting up your internet if you need help. He's not necessary to get it working, but if you need any help, he's there. And even if you don't need help, he'll still be standing at the bottom, just smiling at you. Forever. In the 3DS eShop, there's also a sentient shopping bag that shows up to help you through the first time setup, and every time afterward while the shop is loading too. Or if we go to the sound or camera apps, there's a cool little parrot that gives you tips about their respective applications' features. The apps themselves also add a ton of personality as well, not even including the parrots and robots. For example, when loading into the eShop on the Wii U, you could play a small roulette game where you try to match 3 rows that create a thumbnail of various titles that are already installed on your system. Or when installing games on the Wii Shop channel, Mario will run across the screen collecting coins and hitting blocks until the download is complete. If we go back to the 3DS system transfer again, you can actually see Pikmin running across the screen and picking up the theoretical parts of one 3DS and moving it over to the other one to signify a progress bar. The same thing happens in a Wii to Wii U transfer, except this time the Pikmin launch off in a paper rocket once the transfer is complete. I could go on and on about all the tiny little extras in every single app, shop, and channel on these systems, but I'm sure you get the point now. Everywhere you went on any of these consoles' interfaces, they just bled charm and personality. I probably sound like a broken record at this point, but I think it's important to highlight the immense presence of the charm on these consoles so that the impact of the absence of it on the other console is not understated in the slightest.
Everyone I know and love has forgotten about me. I'm still stuck in this seemingly empty void with nothing but the soft hum of wind and the occasional clicking sound effect. I'm losing it, man. I need something. I need to hear something!
And now we arrive at the Nintendo Switch, a much different landscape than the previous consoles discussed. In comparison, its interface is barren, with very little substance or personality. Everything that made a Nintendo console is seemingly gone. The identity that was established over the past 3 generations seems to have been thrown out the window. All that's left is a mere shell of what used to be and what could have been. For starters, music is nowhere to be found throughout the entirety of the Switch's interface. This is in stark contrast to the abundance of it on the past 4 consoles, especially since the most recent ones, the Wii U and 3DS, had the largest system music libraries to date. There are also no pre-installed applications on the system, so the possibility of their music, sound effects, or design contributing to the charm of the console is non-existent. Mii's are really one of the only remnants of the past still intact, but as you would guess, that too is in a much weaker state. The Mii Creator has been stuffed into a sub-menu of the system settings, and obviously also doesn't contain any music once opened. You are simply stuck listening to the clicks of your menu navigation. Mii's used to be a huge part of Nintendo consoles, and their creation applications were many people's favorite part of the systems. Heck, I know a ton of people who would just turn on their Wii and make Mii's. Now, on the Switch, they just seem like an afterthought. Themes, while also not present on the Wii U, aren't present on the Switch either. Technically, there is a dark theme and a light theme, but I personally don't think that should really count, especially in comparison to the 3DS and its themes. Either way, I honestly think themes are the least important thing out of all the stuff I've mentioned. One thing to think about these, though, is that on the 3DS, Nintendo charged around $2 for each individual theme. If they wanted to implement the same system into the Switch, it could easily make them a considerable amount of money, so it's not like it's a pointless thing to add to the system. I'm honestly confused though, because it really did seem like they intended to add more themes to the Switch in the future, considering the fact that there is an entire section of the settings called Themes, and the names of the two are Basic Black and Basic White. To me at least, this heavily implies the addition of more themes in the future, but that never came. I think this is why so many people are disappointed at their absence, because it really did seem like it was going to be another 3DS scenario the way that menu was set up.
Again?
I wasn't!
While there is no music on the Switch, there is a very small collection of sound effects that can play while navigating the system. All of the buttons across the bottom of the main screen have their own unique sound. Starting a game kind of has a cool sound effect, same thing with clicking the All Software button at the end of the home screen. When opening the eShop, an animation and sound plays while loading in, and finally there's a little jingle-esque thing that plays when opening your profile from the main screen.
Make it stop!
Overall though, this interface just seems so sterile compared to the previous generations. It honestly feels too sterile to even be considered Nintendo. Though, the real question is, why would they do this? Why would they completely abandon the model and formula they had been using for years in favor of this absurdly simple alternative? Well, I'll give you one guess.
They didn't feel like it.
Money is most likely the sole reason that the interface seemed so compromised with the Switch. It is far more cost effective to make a simple but functional interface than it is to attempt to make a flashy, charming one that also functions well enough for the user to not get lost or frustrated. From a business perspective, creating interfaces like the 3DS and Wii U's just doesn't really make sense, at least not to the extent that they were taken. It makes much more sense to put all that extra money into making the games for the console instead, because that is obviously what people will be spending most of their time doing. With the Switch, they took a very different approach and designed an interface more akin to what you see across many mobile applications today. I'm sure if you've used any device in the past decade, you've noticed how much more simplified the logos and interfaces of every single application have gotten in terms of their aesthetic look. Most agree that this trend began with the release of Apple's iOS 7, which drastically changed the look of the entire user interface compared to iOS 6. Essentially, all the images and logos were flattened, using only simple shapes and fonts to convey their information. This specific type of design philosophy has come to be known as flat design. There are actually many benefits to using flat design, and it's most likely why nearly every company has adopted it. For one, flat design images and logos are much more time efficient and consequently money efficient to make because of their simplicity. Additionally, since the design is less complicated, the interface will be able to load and change much faster than if it wasn't. Even earlier in history though, you can notice flat design being used as well, and that was because computers weren't nearly as prominent before the 2000s. As computers got more advanced, so did the logos and interfaces. Flat design, which gets rid of bezels, shines, and complicated imagery across the board, was also adopted by the Nintendo Switch. On the Wii U, the older type of design is still present, as the flat design trend hadn't even started yet. The Wii U released nearly a year before iOS 7. The thing is, most people aren't very fond of this drastic shift to simplicity, with many pointing out that some imagery is getting so simple to the point of being unrecognizable, which definitely is apparent in some logos today. In other cases, it is very arguable that the simplified changes being made to the logos are completely unnecessary, and only happen to get in on the trend of incorporating flat design.
Why?
In turn, many people have begun to discuss the link between increased simplicity and a loss of individuality, but I really don't feel like that's the only thing that gives personality to a game system specifically. This is why I think that flat design isn't at all the root of the Switch's problems, at least to an extent. The issue people have with it is closely related to just how drastic the change was. Instead of shiny buttons and a more eye-catching interface, we got flat, simple buttons and a clean, sterile interface. To reiterate, I don't believe this is where the main problem lies at all. The problem is that the system is void of all the other forms of charm and personality that the previous ones had and executed so well. While a flashy interface definitely complements a system's charm, it's not integral to the experience of the system in my opinion. It's the music, sound effects, animations, and characters that truly bring the system to life. All of this could easily be done with the Switch's current interface. After all, there are quite a few parallels you can already draw between the Switch and 3DS in terms of their levels of simplicity, and that system still had more than enough charm to go around. With all that being said, there may be some people who simply wonder why I act like this matters so much. Well, it really doesn't. In the grand scheme of things, it does not matter what your console's menus look like and whether or not they have music or a robot that helps you set up your Wi-Fi connection. But it's nice to have, right? You don't need to put whipped cream on your hot cocoa, but it's nice to have, right? It's the same principle. A lot of people really appreciate and enjoy the system music, vibrant interface, and creative usage of original characters to create a living experience for the user. Tons of the music tracks in specific bring comfort and nostalgia to many people, and honestly, all of them are just a joy to listen to. Everyone remembers Wii channels just because of how iconic the Wii's interface design was, and even though the Wii U wasn't nearly as popular, its interface still had a lot of memorable quirks and moments that are sure to stick in someone's mind long after they stop playing, and the same thing goes for the 3DS and DSi. All of these things in tandem, along with all of the amazing games to complement them, is what makes these systems so special. And the bottom line is that the Nintendo Switch seems like it has lost sight of that exact concept, consequently creating a console without life, without charm, and without soul.
It is getting way worse in here. I'm starting to cough up games that aren't about hunting. That's when you know you're in too deep. Maybe it isn't so bad in here after all.